I had been married to Ethan Song for 5 years before I ever set foot in his office. 5 years. That number sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold as I stood in the elevator lobby of Renew Materials for the very first time. The building smelled like bergamot and money, the kind of clean, expensive scent that clings to the clothes of people who have never touched soil with their bare hands. I ran my thumb across my palm, feeling the ghost of dirt that no amount of scrubbing could fully erase from my calluses. I was a woman who grew things. He was a man who built things. I had always thought that made us complementary. I never questioned his absence. He was busy, I was busy, and I trusted him the way you trust the sun to rise. Blindly, absolutely, without ever thinking to check the horizon for clouds. That was my first mistake. That was the mistake that would cost me everything I thought I knew. The elevator ride up to the executive floor took 47 seconds. I counted. I don't know why I counted. Maybe because I had nothing else to do in that sleek, mirrored box except watch my own reflection stare back at me with an expression I didn't quite recognize. I looked like myself. Dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a simple cream-colored knit sweater, jeans that had been washed so many times they were soft as butter. I looked like a woman who had just left her greenhouse, which was exactly what I was. I had driven into the city on a whim because my Uncle Henry had asked me to sign some papers, and because the bougainvillea had just finished their first big bloom of the season, and because I thought, naively, stupidly, beautifully, that it might be nice to surprise my husband. I had never surprised him before. I had never had reason to. The elevator doors slid open onto a corridor so hushed that my footsteps seemed to apologize for existing. The carpet was thick enough to swallow the sound of an earthquake. I walked past closed doors with frosted glass panels, past watercolor landscapes that probably cost more than my entire greenhouse operation for a year, past a reception desk where no one was sitting. And then I heard it. A woman's laugh. Bright, confident, infectious. The kind of laugh that makes you want to know what's so funny, that makes you feel like you're missing out on something wonderful. Then I heard his voice. "Don't worry," Ethan said. "I've never let you down before, have I?" That tone. I knew that tone. That was the voice he used when he pulled me close in the dark, when he whispered good night against my hair. That was the voice he used for me. Not for clients. Not for colleagues. For me. And he was using it for her. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand hovering over the handle of the conference room door, and I felt something crack open in my chest. A hairline fracture in the perfect porcelain of my trust. I didn't know yet. Not really. My brain was still catching up to what my heart already knew. I told myself it was nothing. A business associate. A client. A friend. Ethan had female colleagues. That was normal. That was fine. But I couldn't make my hand push the door open. And then the woman laughed again and she said something I couldn't quite catch. Something teasing, something intimate. And Ethan laughed too, that low, warm rumble that I had always thought was reserved for me. I pushed the door open. The room was vast, dominated by a long oak table surrounded by 24 leather chairs. Most of them were occupied. Ethan sat at the head of the table, a silver pen in his hand, a spreadsheet glowing on the screen behind him. He looked up when the doors opened and I watched his face change in slow motion. First confusion, then recognition, then a wave of bloodless shock that drained every drop of color from his skin. His jaw went slack. His pen slipped from his fingers, bounced off the table and clattered onto the carpet. Nobody moved to pick it up. Standing beside him, one hand resting on the back of his chair, was a woman in a white silk blouse and a fitted black pencil skirt. Her hair was swept up in a sleek chignon, and her smile was still lingering on her lips like the aftertaste of something sweet. She had been mid-laugh when I walked in, her head tilted toward him like a sunflower toward the sun. Now she was looking at me. Then at him. Then back at me. The laughter was gone. The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint rustle of someone shifting in their chair, the distant, muffled sound of traffic from the street below. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Then the woman recovered. She stepped back, a careful, deliberate half-step that put distance between her body and Ethan's chair. Her smile was back but different now. Professional. Diplomatic. The kind you wear when you're not sure who's walking into the room. "Hello," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Can I help you?" I didn't answer her. I was looking at Ethan. He was standing now, bracing himself against the table as if his legs had forgotten how to work. His face was the color of old paper. His lips moved but no sound came out. His tie was slightly askew and I noticed, with a strange detached clarity, that it was the silver-gray silk tie I had bought him for our 3rd anniversary. I had wrapped it in tissue paper and handwritten a card that said, "To my anchor." He was wearing my gift while standing next to another woman who thought she was his fiancée. "Ethan," I said. My own voice surprised me. "Come." Almost flat. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Rachel. What? How? I didn't know you were coming." "Obviously." I stepped into the room. Every eye was on me. I could feel the weight of their stares like physical pressure on my skin. "Uncle Henry asked me to come sign some papers. He's transferring his shares to me." "Right. Right." He was nodding too fast like a broken bobblehead. "The shares. Remember. I thought you'd call first." "Did you?" I walked closer. The woman had retreated another step, her hand now gripping the edge of the conference table. I looked at her nameplate. Mina Lin. Vice President of Marketing. "Miss Lin," I said. "Is that right?" "Yes." Her voice was steady, but I could see a fine tremor in her fingers. "I'm the marketing director." "And you are?" "I'm his wife." I let the words land like stones. 5 years. This is the first time I've been to the office. Guess I should have come sooner, huh? Someone behind me drew in a sharp breath. A coffee cup clinked against its saucer. In the dead silence, every tiny sound was amplified. Mina Lin's face had gone pale, not the chic pale of expensive foundation, but the blotchy, bloodless pale of a body in shock. She looked at Ethan. "Ethan," she said, her voice smaller now. "Younger. Is she?" "He's married," I said. "News to you." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her face said everything. I saw the moment it hit her. The color drained from her cheeks in a wave that started at her temples and washed downward. Her hand flew to her mouth and she took a stumbling step backward, knocking against a chair. The chair scraped across the floor with a sound like a scream. "Fiancée." She whispered the word as if it were a foreign language. You said we were." "I know what I said." Ethan's voice cracked. "Mina, please let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut in. "Explain that you've been married for 5 years and never thought to mention it? Explain that you let her walk around calling herself your fiancée while I was at home watering your plants and waiting for you to come back?" Ethan reached for my arm. "Rachel, please. Let's go somewhere else. Let me explain." I pulled my arm back. My skin felt hot where his fingers had brushed it. "You told her you were a bachelor. You let her call you her fiancé in front of your shareholders. You've been playing pretend for 5 years. And you want to explain?" "It's not what you think," he started. "Then what is it?" I turned back to him. "What's the version where any of this makes sense?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. I looked at the man standing frozen by the door. Victor Lee, the company's vice president. I knew Victor. He came to our house every Lunar New Year with gift baskets and polite small talk. Perfectly pleasant, perfectly bland. He had ridden up in the elevator with me, chattering nervously about new projects and new clients, and he had never once mentioned that I was about to walk into a room where my husband was pretending to be someone else's future. "Victor," I said, "did you know about this?" Victor's mouth worked soundlessly. He looked at Ethan, then at me, then at the floor. His hands were shaking. He didn't answer. But his silence was an answer in itself. They all knew. Every single person in that room. The shareholders, the executives, the assistants hovering at the edges. They all knew Ethan was married and they'd all played along with his little fiction. All except one. The woman he'd been stringing along. The woman who'd just learned the truth in the worst possible way. I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard Ethan's footsteps stumbling after me, his voice begging me to wait. I didn't stop. I pressed the button. The elevator doors slid open and I stepped inside. "Rachel, please." I turned around. He was standing in the hallway, his face gray, his eyes wild. Behind him, in the doorway of the conference room, Mina Lin stood with her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes red-rimmed and glassy. She looked like a woman who had just watched her entire future collapse in a single sentence. "Ethan," I said, "you're going to hear from my lawyer." The doors closed. I watched the floor numbers tick down. My reflection stared back at me from the stainless steel. A woman with a perfectly composed face and not a single tear on her cheek. I looked calm. I looked collected. I looked like someone who had everything under control. But inside my chest something was breaking into pieces. Something I'd spent 5 years building. 5 years as Mrs. Ethan Song, and I'd never once set foot in his office. I trusted him completely. Absolutely. Blindly. And now I knew. I was a joke. The quiet, trusting wife who stayed in her greenhouse while her husband built a whole other life in the city. A life that included a fiancé and a house and a future that had no room for me. The elevator reached the lobby. I walked through the gleaming atrium, past the bergamot-scented reception desk, past the young woman who had tried to warn me without warning me. She looked up as I passed, her face pale with guilt, and I saw her open her mouth to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe an excuse, but I walked right past her. I had nothing to say to any of them. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember pulling into the driveway or unlocking the front door, or walking through the house that had been my sanctuary for 5 years. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the living room couch, still wearing my sweater, staring at the wall. The clock on the mantel said 2:15 p.m. I watched the hands crawl forward. 3 o'clock, 4:30. 6 o'clock. The house was too quiet. It had always been too quiet, I realized now. I had filled the silence with music, with podcasts, with the hum of my own thoughts, never once wondering why my husband was never there to fill it with me. The phone buzzed relentlessly on the coffee table. Ethan's name flashed on the screen over and over. I watched it light up and dim like a frantic heartbeat. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. My hands were numb. My entire body felt like it was wrapped in layers of cotton, muffling every sensation. At 4 o'clock my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. At 4:15 she called again. Then my father. Then my mother again. I turned the phone face down on the table. At 8:30 my mother texted, "Rachel, answer your phone. Your father is threatening to drive over there and break down his door." I didn't reply. At 9 o'clock my sister Lynn showed up at the front gate. I watched her through the security camera, pounding the doorbell, yelling my name, her voice cracking with worry. She was wearing mismatched pajamas and sneakers, which meant she had left her apartment in a hurry. I hit the intercom. "Go home, Lynn." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Open the goddamn door." "I just want to be alone." "I'm not leaving. I'll call the fire department. I'll call the police. I'll stand here screaming until the neighbors call the cops on me." I opened the door. Lynn rushed in and grabbed me by the shoulders. Her eyes were wild, her face streaked with tears that she hadn't bothered to wipe away. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I swear to God, if he laid a hand on you." "He didn't hurt me." I pulled away and sat back down on the couch. I was surprised by how flat my voice sounded. Like I was reading lines from a script. "He just lied to me. For 5 years." Lynn sat beside me. She took my hand and squeezed it hard, so hard I could feel my bones shifting. "Uncle Henry called me. He had no idea. He said if he'd known what Ethan was doing, he'd never have sent you there. It's not his fault." I stared at the wall. There was a small crack in the plaster near the ceiling. I had never noticed it before. "It's mine." "How is it your fault?" "I should have known." My voice came out flat, robotic. "I should have seen it. He was never home. He never introduced me to anyone from his company. I never asked. I just trusted him." "Rachel." "I trusted him," I said again. The words were starting to feel heavy, like stones I was stacking on my own chest. I trusted him completely. And he was building a whole other life. Another woman. Another house. Another everything. Lynn was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "Do you think he actually slept with her?" I finally turned to look at my sister. Her eyes were red. I realized she'd been crying and I hadn't even noticed. "Does it matter? He pretended to be her fiancé. He let her believe she was going to marry him. That's not a mistake, Lynn. That's a performance. That's a whole second act." My phone buzzed again. Ethan's name. I hit decline. Lynn watched me. "What are you going to do?" "Divorce." Obviously. Obviously. But how? He's got money. He's got lawyers. He's got a whole company full of people covering for him. "Then I'll get my own lawyers. And I'll make sure he pays." Lynn nodded slowly. "Good. That's the Rachel I know. I didn't feel like the Rachel she knew. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I had spent 5 years building a life with a man I thought I knew, and I had been wrong about every single thing that mattered. Lynn stayed until almost midnight. She made me eat half a bowl of soup. She sat with me in silence while I stared at the wall. She didn't try to fix me, which I appreciated. She just sat there, a solid presence at my side, reminding me that I wasn't entirely alone. When she finally left, she hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I will. Promise me. I promise. She left. I locked the door behind her and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I had never noticed how empty it sounded. I walked to the bedroom and opened Ethan's closet. His side was neat and orderly, suits in a perfect row, shoes lined up like soldiers. I had always admired his tidiness. Now it looked like the careful organization of a man who had something to hide. I pulled out one of his shirts. A simple white button-down, the kind he wore to work every day. I held it up to my face and inhaled. It smelled like him, that familiar mix of cologne and laundry detergent and something else I had never been able to identify. I dropped it on the floor. I didn't want to smell him anymore. I didn't want to remember the way he held me at night, the way he whispered my name in the dark, the way he had made me believe I was the center of his world. I was never the center. I was just a corner. A quiet corner he could keep hidden while he built his empire around someone else. I slept in the guest room that night. I didn't want to lie in the bed where we had shared so many promises. The next morning I woke before dawn. I had slept maybe 2 hours in fragments, waking every half hour with my heart pounding. I lay in bed watching the sky turn from black to gray to pale pink, and I thought about the past 5 years. Ethan had been good to me. Genuinely good, or so I had believed. He remembered everything, anniversaries, birthdays, the day we first met. He was kind to my parents, patient with my grandmother, generous with my friends. He never raised his voice. He never forgot to bring me flowers when I was feeling low. He brought me flowers. I grew flowers for a living and he still brought me flowers. I had always thought that was romantic. Now it seemed like a performance, a carefully crafted role he played to keep me from looking too closely. I got out of bed at 6 a.m. and went to the greenhouse. The air inside was warm and humid, thick with the smell of damp soil and growing things. The bougainvillea were in their second bloom, clusters of deep magenta flowers bursting from the tips of every branch. I had planted them 5 years ago, the same year I married Ethan. I had chosen bougainvillea because they were resilient, because they could grow in poor soil, because they bloomed again and again no matter how many times they were cut back. I stood there surrounded by my plants and I let myself cry. Just for a few minutes. I let the tears come and I didn't try to stop them. They dripped onto the soil, onto the leaves, onto my gardening gloves. I stood there until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I wiped my face and started watering. I spent the whole morning in the greenhouse. I didn't check my phone. I didn't answer the door. I just worked, pruning, watering, repotting. The plants didn't ask questions. They just needed water, sunlight, and patience. They were the only things in my life that made any sense. At 9 a.m. someone knocked on the greenhouse door. I opened it, expecting Lynn or my mother. It was Mina Lynn. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, her hair in a messy ponytail, wearing a faded sweatshirt that was too big for her. She was holding a plastic fruit basket from the grocery store, the kind you buy when you don't know what else to bring. Her hands were shaking. "Mrs. Song," she said. "I came to apologize." I looked at her for a long moment. I had imagined hating her. I had imagined wanting to scream at her, to throw things at her, to blame her for everything that had gone wrong. But looking at her now, pale, trembling, clearly devastated, I felt nothing but a hollow ache of recognition. She was as much a victim as I was. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside and looked around. Her eyes lingered on the bougainvillea, then on the neat rows of seedlings, then back at me. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks without any sound to accompany them. 5 years, she said. I had no idea. I swear to God I had no idea. I know. I pulled out a plastic stool for her. You said that yesterday. I mean it. He told me he was single. He told everyone he was single. I asked Victor. I asked his assistant. I asked HR. Everyone said he was unmarried. His office doesn't have a single photo of you. Not one. She sat down heavily, still clutching the fruit basket. I took it from her and set it aside. I didn't want fruit. I didn't want anything. We started dating last fall, she said. He pursued me for months. Flowers every day, texts every morning, lunch dates, dinner dates, weekend trips. He told me he wanted to marry me. He said we'd have a future together. I believed him. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Yesterday I called him my fiancé in front of everyone. And he didn't correct me. He just stood there and smiled. He'd been telling people we were engaged for weeks. He asked me to help him pick out a house. I thought I was the happiest woman in the world. Me too, I said quietly. Once. We sat in silence for a while. The greenhouse was warm and peaceful, the only sounds the drip of water and the rustle of leaves. I had always found comfort here. Now I found a strange kind of detachment. Do you hate me? Mina asked. No. Do you hate him? Yes. The word came out without hesitation. More than anything. He made me a liar. He made me a villain. I was sleeping with someone else's husband and I didn't even know it. I hate him for that. Good, I said. So do I. She stayed for about half an hour. She told me about her job, her family, her hopes for the future. All the things she had shared with Ethan, all the things he had used to build his fantasy. She told me that she had introduced him to her father, a wealthy investor who had been instrumental in Ryan's early success. She told me that her father had been planning to transfer his shares to her as a wedding gift. He was using you to get your father's money, I said flatly. I know that now. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I've been replaying every conversation, every moment. I can see all the signs I missed. He always changed the subject when I asked about his family. He never wanted to meet my friends. He kept our relationship so secret that I thought he was just being private. I was so stupid. You weren't stupid. You were trusting. That's not a flaw. She looked at me with surprise. How can you not hate me? I told you. I don't hate you. I hate him. And I hate myself for not seeing it sooner. When she left, she stood at the greenhouse door and looked back at me with raw red eyes. I'm resigning. I can't work there anymore. Every day would be a reminder of how stupid I was. Don't resign, I said. He's the one who should leave. She shook her head. I need to rebuild. I can't do that in the same building where he made me believe his lies. She left. I watched her walk down the driveway, her shoulders hunched, her steps unsteady. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel angry at her either. It just felt heavy. Like I'd swallowed stones. That afternoon Ethan's mother came. She was crying before she even made it through the front door. She grabbed my hands, her fingers cold and trembling, and started apologizing. For Ethan, for the family, for the humiliation. Her name was Grace Song and she had always been kind to me. She had welcomed me into the family with open arms, called me the daughter she never had. Now she looked old and broken, her face streaked with tears. He's so sorry, she kept saying. His father beat him with a belt last night. He's been kneeling in the living room since midnight. He says he'll stay there until you forgive him. He can stay there forever, I said, pulling my hands free. I'm not forgiving him. Rachel, please, he's still your husband. You've been together for 5 years. I know how long I've been married to him, Mom. 5 years. And for every single one of those years he was lying to me. Not just lying, performing. Acting out a fantasy in his office. The only people who weren't in on the joke were me and that poor woman he was leading on. She's nobody, he told me she's nobody. She's somebody, Mom. He's a human being. She spent months falling in love with a man who was already married. He let her. He encouraged it. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty. Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. She sat on the couch and cried for a while. I sat across from her and waited. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't have any to give. She left eventually. I watched her drive away, a tiny, defeated figure in a silver sedan that seemed too big for her. I went back to the greenhouse. The rest of that week was a blur. I stopped eating properly. I lost 8 pounds in 7 days. Lynn came over every afternoon and forced me to drink protein shakes. My mother called every evening and begged me to come stay. I said no every time. I spent most of my days in the greenhouse. I worked from dawn until dusk, pruning and watering and repotting, losing myself in the rhythm of the work. The plants didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. They just grew, stubborn and silent, proof that life went on even when everything else fell apart. On the 5th day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Ethan, handwritten on thick cream stationery. I recognized his handwriting, the elegant loops and careful curves that had always seemed so refined. I almost threw it away. But I opened it instead. Rachel, I know there are no words that can undo what I've done. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it, not yet, maybe not ever. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. When I started the company, I was desperate. I needed capital and Henry Lynn had it. He made it clear his daughter was important to him, that if I wanted his investment, I'd have to be part of his extended family. So I hid my marriage. Just for a little while, I told myself. Just until the company was stable. But it never got stable. It grew and I grew more afraid. I was afraid that if anyone found out, I'd lose everything. And somewhere along the way, I started believing my own lies. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. I told myself you'd never find out. I didn't intend to fall for Mina. But I was lonely and she looked at me like I was someone important. I was so hungry for that feeling that I let it happen. I let her fall for me. I let her believe she was the one. I never wanted to lose you. You were the anchor. But I was too weak and too selfish to hold on to you while holding on to everything else. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I'm asking anyway, please don't destroy the company. It's the only thing I have left. I'll give you anything else. The house, the cars, the money. Just don't take Rian from me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Ethan. I read the letter 3 times. The first time I felt nothing. The second time I felt a flicker of anger. The third time I felt a cold, clear certainty. He wasn't sorry for lying to me. He was sorry he got caught. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing his company. I tore the letter in half. Then into quarters. Then into tiny pieces that fluttered to the floor like snow. I didn't answer him. I didn't call. I didn't text. I let him stew in his own fear. On the 8th day I hired a lawyer. Francesca Frankie Fong was recommended by Lynn, a sharp, no-nonsense litigator who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had never lost a case. I met her in her sleek glass-walled office and I told her everything. Frankie listened without interrupting. She took notes on a tablet, her fingers moving fast, her dark eyes sharp and focused. When I finished, she set down her stylus and leaned back in her chair. Rachel, she said, I'm going to be honest with you. Your husband is a very wealthy man and he has access to very good lawyers. He's going to try to bury you in paperwork and outspend you in court. But there's one thing he doesn't have that you do. What's that? Righteousness. And I mean that in the most tactical way possible. You walked into a room full of people who were complicit in his lies. You have witnesses. You have the moral high ground. And you have a stake in his company that he desperately wants to control. We can use all of that. He wants to settle, I said. He sent me a letter. He offered me the house, the cars, my personal accounts, and a cash payment. In exchange, he wants me to relinquish my shares in Rian New Materials. Frankie's eyes narrowed. He offered you that in writing? Yes. Good. That's evidence of guilt. He wouldn't be offering you that much if he wasn't scared. I pulled the letter out of my bag, the one I had torn and taped back together. Frankie read it with a growing smile. This is beautiful, she said. This is exactly what we needed. He admits here that he lied to you, that he hid his marriage, that he had a relationship with another woman. This is a goldmine. So what do I do? First, don't sign anything. Second, let me do some digging. I have a contact at a private investigations firm, strictly above board, fully licensed. They can pull financial records, corporate filings, travel logs. Find out what he's been up to. His company already knows about me now. They won't be hiding anything. They'll try. Frankie's eyes were sharp. But they won't be able to hide everything. Men like your husband always leave trails. They always think they're smarter than everyone else. And they're always wrong. I agreed. 2 weeks later, Frankie called me back. She had a stack of documents on her desk, 3 inches thick, bound in a black folder. Her face was grim. I want you to prepare yourself, Rachel. There's more to this than just a woman in a conference room. I opened the folder. The first page was the original incorporation filing for Rian New Materials. I scanned down the shareholder list. Ethan's name at the top, then Victor Lee's. And near the bottom, a name I'd never seen before. Henry Lynn Sr. holding 15% of the company. Henry Lynn, I said slowly. Mina's father. Frankie nodded. He was an early investor. Put in the capital that got Rian off the ground. That 15% stake has been his from the beginning. So Ethan couldn't let anyone know he was married. Because if Henry Lynn found out, he'd think Ethan was stringing his daughter along. Exactly. Ethan needed Henry's investment. He needed Henry's connections. And somewhere along the way, he realized he could get even more if he played along with Mina's romantic interest. Calculated decision. He kept you hidden so he could keep Mina's family invested. I stared at the document. He built the whole company on a lie. 2 lies really. One to me, one to her. There's more. Frankie pulled out a property deed. Last year, Ethan used company funds to purchase a luxury villa outside the city. Registered in his name, but the purchase contract was signed by Mina Lynn as co-purchaser. He was buying her a house with company money. Their future home. That's exactly what he was doing. Interior design done by a firm that specializes in modern romantic style. Mina's taste, according to the records. I closed the folder. My hands weren't shaking, which surprised me. I felt cold. Detached. Like I was reading about someone else's life. What do I do next? Frankie's smile turned hard. How you fight. Over the next month, I used my shareholder rights to demand a complete audit of Rian's finances. The board was required to comply. I hired an independent accounting firm to trace the villa's purchase. Every dollar that left the company accounts, every signature. The evidence was damning. Funds designated as capital equipment purchases had been diverted to a private escrow account Ethan controlled, then gone directly to the villa's down payment. But I didn't go straight to the board with it. Frankie had a better idea. Let's make some noise first, she said. She leaked the key findings to a financial news outlet that specialized in corporate governance scandals. Within 48 hours, an article went live. Rian new materials so under fire for alleged fund misappropriation and a secret romance. The story went viral in the business community. It wasn't just the money, it was the love triangle angle. The headlines wrote themselves. CEO's double life. Wife of 5 years versus fiancé in the boardroom. My phone exploded. I didn't answer any of the calls. But I read every comment on every article. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. The next morning, Ethan's office released a frantic statement denying everything. Baseless allegations, they called it. A disgruntled spouse trying to damage the company. That was their mistake. Because that same afternoon, I submitted my full audit report to the board. With every document, every signature, every wire transfer. And I formally requested a special shareholder meeting. The board had no choice but to comply. The meeting was scheduled for the first week of September. I had 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks of working with Frankie, of building my case, of sleepless nights and early mornings in the greenhouse. I didn't see Ethan during that time. I didn't want to. But I heard things through the grapevine, that he was drinking too much, that he had stopped going to the office, that his relationship with his parents was deteriorating. The scandal had already taken a toll. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt nothing but a cold, focused determination. Mina called me 3 times during those 6 weeks. The first time she was crying. The second time she was angry. The third time she was resolved. My father is transferring his shares to me, she said. I asked him to. He agreed. Why? Because I want to use them. I want to vote with you at the shareholder meeting. I was silent for a moment. You don't have to do that. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Her voice was steady. He lied to both of us. He used both of us. And I want to be the one who helps take him down. Please, let me do this. I thought about it. Having Mina on my side would be a huge advantage. Her 15% stake, plus my Uncle Henry's original shares, plus the other shareholders who were already disillusioned with Ethan's leadership. It would be enough to swing the vote. Hey, I said. But you need to be prepared for what happens next. He's going to try to destroy you. He's going to say terrible things about you. He's going to try to paint you as the seductress, the homewrecker, the woman who ruined his marriage. I don't care anymore, she said. I don't care what anyone thinks of me. I just want to make sure he pays for what he did. The shareholder meeting was held on a gray Thursday morning in early September. I wore a black sheath dress and pinned my hair back with a silver clip. I walked into the conference room with Frankie at my side and sat down at the table like I owned it. Because in a way I did. I was a shareholder. I had rights. And I was about to exercise them. Ethan was already at the head of the table. He looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He had lost weight too, but not the healthy kind. The kind that comes from fear. His hands were shaking slightly as he shuffled papers in front of him. Victor Lee sat beside him, pale and fidgety, sweating through his collar. At the far end of the table, separate from the rest, sat Henry Lynn Sr., tall, silver-haired, a face like carved granite. He didn't look at Ethan. He didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. But next to him, in a chair that hadn't been there at the last meeting, sat Mina Lynn. I hadn't expected that. I glanced at Frankie. She gave me the smallest nod. The room was packed. More shareholders than I'd ever seen, plus a few journalists Frankie had quietly tipped off. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, and I watched the last shred of hope drain from his face. I opened the meeting by presenting my findings. I projected the audit records onto the screen and walked through them, step by step, in a voice I barely recognized as my own. Ladies and gentlemen, these documents show that the CEO of Rian New Materials diverted more than $2 million from company accounts to fund a personal real estate purchase. The transaction was not disclosed to the board. It was not approved by any vote. It was a unilateral action taken without regard for fiduciary duty or corporate governance. The room was silent. Someone coughed. A pen rolled across the table. This is a clear breach of both company policy and the law. I'm asking the board to launch a formal investigation and to consider whether the current management structure can continue to operate in the best interests of shareholders. Ethan stood up. His face was gray. Rachel. Mr. Song, I said, I'm not finished. He sat back down. I turned to Henry Lynn Sr. Mr. Lynn, you own 15% of this company. Your daughter was misled by the same man who misled me. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm simply asking you to consider where your trust is best placed. Henry Lynn Sr. didn't speak. He didn't move. But then Mina stood up. She was trembling. I could see it in her hands. But her voice was steady. Dad, she said, looking at her father. I've been thinking about this all week. That 15%, it's yours. But you told me you were going to give it to me someday. I'm asking you to give it to me now. And I'm asking you to let me decide how to vote it. The room held its breath. Henry Lynn Sr. looked at his daughter. His expression didn't change. But after a long moment he nodded. I've already signed the transfer papers, he said. My shares now belong to Mina. Mina turned to face the room. Her eyes met mine. And for the first time I saw something in them that wasn't shame or guilt. It was fire. I'm voting with Mrs. Song, Mina said. All 15%. For the investigation. For the removal of the CEO, if that's what the board recommends. She looked at Ethan. You lied to me for a year, she said. You made me fall in love with a man who didn't exist. You made me believe I was building a future with someone who was already building one with someone else. You made me a fool. And you made her a victim. I'm done being either. Ethan's mouth fell open. Mina. I'm not Mina to you anymore, she cut him off. I'm a shareholder. And I'm voting against you. A ripple of shock went through the room. I heard someone whisper, she's got 15%. That's enough to swing it. Victor Lee was shaking. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a squeak. This is a hostile takeover of the board. Victor, I said, turning to him. I haven't forgotten about you. You knew about my husband's lies. You helped him hide them. You came to my house for Lunar New Year, ate my food, smiled at my family, and all the while, you were covering for him while he called another woman his fiancée. You're not innocent. So before you say another word, I'd think about what your own legal exposure looks like. Victor's face went white. He shut his mouth. Ethan's voice broke the silence. Rachel, please. You don't have to do this. I'll give you everything. The house, the money, the shares, you can have it all. Just let me keep the company. It's all I have left. I looked at him. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of lies. And now he was begging like a cornered animal. It's all you have left, I repeated slowly. Because you made it that way. You chose this, Ethan. Every single day for 5 years, you chose to lie to me, to lie to her, to lie to everyone. You built a castle on a foundation of sand. And now the tides come in. I turned to the board. I move for a formal investigation into the CEO's conduct, with a suspension pending the outcome. And I move for a vote of no confidence in the current management team. Mina raised her hand. Seconded. The vote was called. It wasn't even close. With Mina's 15% plus Uncle Henry's original stake and a handful of other shareholders who'd had enough, the motion passed overwhelmingly. Ethan was suspended effective immediately. A temporary CEO was appointed to oversee operations while the investigation proceeded. He sat in his chair as the room emptied around him. His face was hollow. His hands were limp on the table. He looked like a man who'd just watched his entire life collapse in the span of 30 minutes. I walked past him on my way out. Ethan, I said, pausing at the door. You wanted to keep your options open. Now you have all the options in the world. You're single again. Just like you always pretended to be. Congratulations. I didn't wait for his response. I walked out with Frankie and Mina. In the hallway, Mina grabbed my arm. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner, she said. I was so ashamed. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I believe you, I said. And thank you. That took guts. She smiled, a real smile, the first one I'd seen from her. He underestimated both of us. That was his mistake. It was, I agreed. Frankie cleared her throat. Legally, we're not done yet. The investigation will take weeks. But strategically, this was a knockout. I nodded. Good. 3 days later, Victor Lee tendered his resignation. Word spread that he'd accepted a position at a competitor, Ryan's biggest rival. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ethan's right-hand man had jumped to the other side, taking a stack of confidential information with him. That same week, Henry Lynn Sr. announced he was divesting his remaining interests in the company. The news sent Ryan's stock into a tailspin. Institutional investors started pulling back. The new interim CEO announced a full strategic review, which everyone knew was code for, "We're in deep trouble." And then came the personal details. Frankie had done her homework. She found out that Ethan had used the company credit card for personal expenses totaling over $300,000 over the past 2 years. Dinners, hotel stays, luxury gifts, all of it for Mina, all of it while he was still married to me. She'd itemized everything in a supplementary report that was now part of the official investigation record. Some of it leaked to the press. The headlines got worse. Ryan CO funded secret romance with company credit card. Fired executive double life detailed in financial filings. I didn't comment on any of it. I let the story do the work for me. The day the divorce was finalized, I met Ethan one last time at Frankie's office. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his suit hanging loosely on a frame that had dropped 20 pounds in 6 weeks. His hands shook as he sat down across from me. We signed the documents in silence. He'd agreed to everything: the shares, the house, the cars, the cash settlement. The villa had been sold at a loss to repay the company. Mina had already signed away any claim to it. There was nothing left for him to bargain with. When it was done, he set down his pen and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Rachel," he said, "can I say something?" I nodded. He took a long, shaky breath. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know you have every right to hate me. But I want you to understand something. Not to justify myself, there's no justification, but so you know." I waited. When I started the company, I was desperate. I needed capital, and Henry Lynn had it. He made it clear his daughter was important to him, that if I wanted his investment, I'd have to be part of his extended family. So I hid my marriage. Just for a little while, I told myself. Just until the company was stable. His voice cracked. But it never got stable. It grew, and I grew more afraid. I was afraid that if anyone found out, I'd lose everything. And somewhere along the way, I started believing my own lies. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. I told myself you'd never find out. He looked down at his hands. I didn't intend to fall for Mina. But I was lonely, and she looked at me like I was someone important. I was so hungry for that feeling that I let it happen. I let her fall for me. I let her believe she was the one. He raised his eyes to mine. "I never wanted to lose you. You were the anchor. But I was too weak and too selfish to hold on to you while holding on to everything else. I looked at him for a long time. I thought about the 5 years we'd spent together. The quiet evenings, the shared meals, the holidays with our families. The way he'd held my hand when my grandmother died. All real. All fake. Both at once. You did lose me, I said finally. But not when I walked into that conference room. You lost me the first time you decided to keep me a secret. Every day after that was just a countdown. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. I'm not your anchor anymore. Find a new one. I stood up and walked out. I didn't look back. Outside the sun was bright. I stood on the sidewalk with my eyes closed, feeling the warmth on my face, breathing deeply for the first time in weeks. Frankie came out behind me. You okay? I'm not sure yet. But I will be. I went back to the greenhouse. 3 months later, things had settled into a new rhythm. New materials had been forced to restructure. The interim CO stayed on, and the board announced that Ethan's position had been permanently eliminated. He was out. Not CO. Not chairman. Not even a consultant. Just a former founder with a tarnished reputation and a bank account that was considerably lighter than it used to be. Victor Lee's new employer had already started poaching Ryan's clients. The company was limping along, a shadow of its former self. I heard through Uncle Henry that Ethan had moved to a small apartment across town. His mother was trying to get him into therapy. His father wouldn't speak to him. He'd lost his marriage, his company, his dignity, and his family's respect, all in one spectacular crash. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sorry either. I just felt done. My flower farm had grown busy. The publicity from the scandal had brought unexpected attention, not to me personally but to the farm itself. A lifestyle magazine did a profile on the woman who took on a tech empire and came out blooming. A boutique hotel chain reached out about supplying their properties with bougainvillea arrangements. Orders started pouring in. I hired 2 more people to help with the greenhouse. I expanded the seedling beds. I started a small online shop. One afternoon, I opened my phone and saw a post from Mina. She'd started a consulting firm of her own, focusing on corporate ethics and internal culture. Her profile photo showed her standing in front of a new office, smiling, confident, rebuilt. Her caption read, "What doesn't kill you gives you a hell of a story to tell. And a hell of a lot of material for your keynote speeches." I laughed out loud. A few minutes later, she sent me a private message. "Rachel. Still sorry about everything. But also, grateful. You showed me what strength looks like. Hope you're well." I typed back, "I'm great. And you don't need to be sorry anymore." We both got out. On the last day of September, I was sitting on a stool in the greenhouse doorway watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with rose and gold, the same colors as the bougainvillea in their prime. My watering can was in my lap, my gloves on my knees. My phone buzzed. "Uncle Henry." "Rachel, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice crackling with barely suppressed glee. "The new investors are forcing Ethan out entirely. Not just CO, they're buying out his remaining shares at a fire sale price. He's walking away with practically nothing. And Victor Lee's new company just secured Ryan's biggest client. The whole thing is imploding." I smiled. "Good for them. Good for you," Uncle Henry said. "You took him down. You fought clean and you won." "No," I said. "I didn't take him down. He did that to himself. I just stopped holding him up." I hung up. I set my phone aside. I picked up my watering can and walked back into the greenhouse. The new cuttings were sprouting, tiny green leaves pushing toward the fluorescent lights. I gave them a gentle spray and watched the droplets bead on their surfaces. I thought about tomorrow. About next week. About all the seasons to come. I still had flowers to grow. A business to run. A life to live. And that was more than enough. More than I'd ever needed, really. Some things in this world you never get over. You just get through. But the bougainvillea would bloom again. And so would I. The magazine interview came out the following week. The journalist had spent an afternoon with me at the farm, walking through the greenhouse, watching me work. She asked all the right questions, not just about the scandal but about the flowers, the farm, the life I was building. "You've been through a lot," she said. "What have you learned from all of it?" I looked at her, then at the greenhouse behind me, full of green shoots and open blooms. I thought about Ethan. I thought about Mina. I thought about the 5 years I had spent trusting someone who didn't deserve it, and the months I had spent rebuilding myself from the ruins. Some men are like weeds, I said. You pull them out and they grow back meaner. But some women are like bougainvillea. We don't need much soil. We don't need much water. And every time we get cut back, we come back stronger. She asked if I had any regrets. One, I said. I should have visited his office sooner. But I got there eventually. And that's what counts. The interview ran the next week. It went viral just like the scandal had. Somewhere in a small apartment across town, Ethan's song probably read it. I hope he did. Because those words were for him. And for me. And for anyone who'd ever been made to feel small by someone who couldn't see their own reflection in the mirror. 6 months later, I was standing in the greenhouse when I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mina. She had written it by hand on beautiful stationery with her new consulting firm's letterhead. Rachel, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to write it anyway. I wanted to tell you that I'm getting married. To a man who knows everything about my past and doesn't care. To a man who has never lied to me. To a man who doesn't need to pretend to be anyone else. I thought about you when he proposed. I thought about how you walked into that room and didn't scream or cry or fall apart. I thought about how you looked at me with pity instead of hatred. I thought about how you helped me become someone I'm proud of. You didn't have to help me. You didn't have to forgive me. But you did. And I will never forget that. I'm including an invitation to the wedding. I know it's probably asking too much, but I would be honored if you came. Not as a former victim of the same man. As a friend. As someone who showed me what real strength looks like. With gratitude. I read the letter twice. Then I set it down and looked at the invitation. It was simple and elegant, with a small illustration of a flower on the front. Not a bouquet, just a single stem. A bougainvillea. I smiled. I didn't know if I would go to the wedding. But I was glad she had asked. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. Mina, I'm honored. And I'm proud of you. Let me know if you need flowers for the wedding. I know a good florist. I hit send. Then I put down my phone and went back to work. There was still so much to do. New cuttings to plant. Orders to fill. A business to grow. And a life to live. I had built something from nothing. I had taken the broken pieces of my old life and turned them into something new. I had learned that trust was not a weakness, but blind trust was. I had learned that love was not a guarantee, but it was worth the risk. I had learned that I could survive anything. Even the man I had loved. Even the life I had lost. Even the future I had never imagined. I was Rachel Shin. I grew flowers for a living. And I was about to bloom again.